Hi, my name is Maddie. I'm the host of Respect My Region Thai Women podcast, where we talk to influential women in cannabis. On today's show, we have the pleasure of speaking with Rachelle Gordon, a partner in the Women Cannabis Study and an experienced reporter, writer in the cannabis and psychedelic industries. Today, we're going to talk about psychedelics, cannabis journalism, and the Women in Cannabis Study, and more. So, Rachelle, how are you today?
I am so awesome. Thanks for asking. How are you doing, Maddie?
I'm doing really great. I'm excited to start today and have you on. Can you briefly introduce yourself a little bit for everybody?
Sure. So I am a cannabis and psychedelics journalist and copywriter. I've been in the legal industry for 6 years, traveling North America to the various markets, going to events, seeing what's happening on the scene. I do everything from product reviews to business news to patient stories, everything in between. I originally was in education, but I caught a felony possession case in 2011. So I had to stop teaching and sort of found my way into content writing at first as a side hustle. And then it sort of segued and became my career. And then as the cannabis industry started coming up, I started finding myself getting more gigs in that. Fast forward to where I am today. It's a full-time career and I'm super blessed.
That's so crazy you say that because how I got into writing in general and the cannabis industry, right now is because I lost my job and it launched me into this. Like, my friend Hannah, who works with my company, got me involved, and it's like really been super cool getting this like eye opening experience. So that's really cool. That's how you started. So, what got you into specifically talking about like weed and psychedelics in general?
Well, I've always had a passion for the plant. And I just thought, it was really cool to get to be a part of something on the ground level, just having that personal experience. But really, it goes a little bit deeper than that. I mean, I love getting high. There's no doubt about that. But when I realized that this information could impact lives, it really sort of changed the game for me and became really what drives me. I'll tell you a quick story. My dad, when I was growing up, had really severe epilepsy, and he was on a ton of different medications and nothing was working for him. And so he went in to have a surgery where they can correct the epilepsy, and he ended up having a massive stroke during the surgery, which paralyzed him. He was brain damaged, and he actually passed away just a couple of years ago after long-term complications from the stroke. He spent almost my whole life in assisted living, nursing homes, things like that. And I'm convinced that if we knew then, back in the 90s, what we know now about cannabis and how it relates to epilepsy, what it can do for people with epilepsy, that he could have at least tried it. And maybe his life could have been different. Our lives could have been different in my family. And so knowing that, I really made it my purpose to inform people about the powers of this plant so that they can make an informed choice about it.
Yeah, for real. Like, I saw, I don't know if you saw, there was a Super Bowl ad that they didn't allow to pass, but it had like a cannabis ad that included epilepsy and like a ton of other things that people were struggling with, but unfortunately the Super Bowl didn't let that air. Did you see that?
Yeah, for sure. It's super lame how they continue to censor cannabis content. Like the majority of Americans live in a place where cannabis is legal. The majority of Americans want this to be legal on a federal level. And yet, for some reason, these institutions keep wanting to censor us. And I mean, you probably know all the time Instagram accounts get taken down, shadow bans happen all the time. It's just ridiculous. And there's nothing that can be done about it until there's federal reform or these companies just decide to, give us a little bit of a break.
For real. It's I love the weed maps. I think it was weed maps, the broccoli one that made it through. That was just awesome because it is true. Like, it seems so silly that something that has progressed so far and has multiple industries, is making big bank and improving people's lives, has to be something that we can't even talk about when, we got Trojan ads, we got, beer ads and all that, but when it comes down to the people that really need it the most, we decide that it's too much to talk about. It's not, a part of the conversation, which I don't think is fair.
It's super unfair, but hopefully we'll see some change soon. I think the stigmas are starting to erode for sure.
Yeah, and what is the scene like in Minneapolis right now? Like, what's kind of the idea about weed over there?
Well, it's kind of funny here because people in general seem pretty for cannabis. A lot of people consume cannabis, especially in the Twin Cities. But we still only have a medical program. in Minnesota, and it's pretty restrictive. It's a lot like how Florida's used to be. I think Minnesota is going to get flower starting next month. But there are only 2 licensed producers in the state. They run the
Wow.
dispensaries. There are only like 8 dispensaries. And the list of qualifying conditions is pretty short. And it's really hard to find a doctor to certify you. So there's so many different barriers to getting on the program. And then once you're on the program, the medicine is super expensive and it's not even that great. It's like $100 for a distillate cart. And the sad part is that people here don't even know what they're missing. Like they don't even understand that there's a difference between distillate and live resin, and that there are benefits to live resin having a whole plant experience. And so it's just a drag. And although cannabis possession itself is decriminalized, like you can have an ounce and a half and it's basically kind of like a traffic ticket. But if you have any oil or anything like that outside of the program, like that's an automatic felony. So it's kind of wild. I think people get kind of surprised when they find out that there is not an adult use program and that the medical program is so restrictive. But Minnesota's kind of backwards. I mean, we only just got the ability to buy beer on a Sunday like 3 years ago. So it's just like, things are taking a long time to happen for sure. And it's kind of crazy, going back and forth from California to see a market that's so rapidly mature. And then to come back to Minnesota is just like such a weird dichotomy.
Yeah, and so with like Minnesota being in the early stages of legalization, where do you see like psychedelics coming up in the space? Do you see a place for it in Minnesota right now, or is it not time? Or what's
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be pretty far off as far as like any sort of decrim happening, like we've seen in Oregon and stuff. But I do think that we will see federal movement on medical psychedelics sooner than later. I actually kind of feel like we're going to see medical psychedelics before we see medical marijuana on a federal level, just with how fast it's happening. I mean, I think Canada just announced like yesterday that now they're approving psilocybin and MDMA for therapeutic uses. So hopefully we're not too far behind.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't even realize like how far Minnesota was in that actually. So, what gave you like the kind of the credentials to be a cannabis writer? Because for me it was just kind of smoking weed at first, and then I've kind of realized how big and beautiful the world is, from this point, and then just kind of researched from there. um, where did you come from in that?
I guess I just sort of kind of, like a lot like you did, just kind of blazed my own trail, no pun intended, right? I mean, I had personal experience with the plant, I had a passion for the plant, and I had a knack for writing, which it sounds like, we both do. And so you kind of just, make it happen. And I guess I was really fortunate to be in the right place at the right time, several different times, and got connected with some people who gave me a chance to write for their publications. I was able to get into High Times and Cannabis Now fairly early. And once I did that, you have those bylines under your belt and things kind of start rolling from there, as you know. And for you, like being involved with a group like Respect My Region, everyone knows who they are. You guys are crushing it. So, I think getting involved with groups like that can really help build your clout for sure.
Yeah, I've loved the team. Like ever since I've been on it, it's been like the coolest cultural experience. Like I literally went from a job in corporate where I got like literally let go because I didn't fit in with the eggshell theme. Like they use eggshell for real, the word. And I went from that to completely like going into cannabis and taking a chance and writing on it, and having them believe in me like really allowed me to learn more. And it's so crazy to think, at first you come from like a indica to sativa kind of binary understanding, and then it just like completely blows up. Where do you like how can people become more educated about cannabis today? Like what are the resources that people should be using?
Well, I think, Respect My Region obviously is one of them. Like the coverage is so amazing because, between the music and the brands and like all the culture, like it's a really big melting pot, which I think is awesome. I also really like Leafly. I like Cannabis Now. I like Skunk. I like Beard Bros. Shout out to Beard Bros for sure. There's a lot of really great outlets who are putting out information when obviously the mainstream media won't touch it. I always encourage people to do their homework and to learn as much about this plant as they possibly can. I actually set like an alert on Google. So if any news pops up on Google News, I just, get a notification. And as you know, stuff is popping off so fast. Every single day, it seems like there's another, development. There's another research study that comes out telling us stuff that we don't know that we don't know. And I think just making sure to stay on top of it and informing yourself every day. I try to search every day for cannabis news, so see what's
Yeah,
going
for
on.
real. And I learned like there was this awesome class that I took in college. I'm gonna have to shout her out next time, my teacher. But she taught us to like look at everything objectively. And when it comes to just I lost my train of thought because I was just remembering how wonderful she was. But she told us to like look at everything like, it's not so black and white. And I feel that people have like a stigma or an association with cannabis that they may think, there's so many different ways that people are like looking at it and they don't really have like a good experience. How can people garner like a better experience? Like where should they, because I know like we can read online, but if there isn't people that they can talk to, I feel like are dispos open enough to allow like public, I don't know, understanding?
That's a great question. I wish that they were, I wish that they could become more of a foreground for that. And I think they kind of are, and because I do kind of think that the bud tenders really are the gatekeepers to the industry. But yeah, I think it's important to actually hear about personal experiences. Like I know for myself, when I got into the legal industry, I had a lot of pushback from my extended family members. They were like, no one will take you seriously. This is just a passing fad. This isn't a thing. And I could talk to them like, oh, well, I met this person who had their life changed. I had this person who, cannabis saved their life. But it wasn't until they met someone who had a story like that and had a personal experience that they could actually be like, oh, wow, okay, this is real. It's not just her blowing smoke. Right. And so
Right.
no pun intended. And so it's just like, I think being able to be aware and listen to people and reach out to people in your community, especially for people who live in like a rural area, it's important to know that you're not alone. Like there's probably other people in your community who are benefiting from this plant, whether it's legal or not. And so I think being able to just have a keen perception and have conversations with people, don't be shy. But yeah, I think more people should visit dispensaries, especially in legal states, even if they're overwhelmed. And even if they're not into cannabis, I think it's just good to go scope it out and see what's out there, because it is really overwhelming. But just getting used to it, just like it's another shop, pop in, see what's going on.
Exactly. How do you feel about the cannabis consumption sites as well? Because there's more like lounges or ideas of lounges popping up. Do you see that being like really profitable?
Yeah, definitely. I think once they get going, we're going to see the consumption space really pop off because people need a safe place to consume this plant. And unfortunately, right now, they don't really have one. People are really used to going to the bar, hanging out, chilling. It'd be really great if there were a place where people could just hang out and smoke. There's a spot in Oakland that I really like from the 215 days. It's actually called the Cozy Art Lounge, and it's been around for a long time, and it's actually like an art lounge. You pay a membership fee and you can go in there. There's like a pool table, there's arts and crafts, there's DVDs. You can just chill, smoke, hang out with people. And I think those are going to definitely be the wave of the future. It's taken a long time for them to get off the ground, but I think once they do, they'll definitely be humming. I mean, every time that I go to one in California, it seems like there's a lot of folks hanging around. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really excited for it, especially because a lot of people are now shying away from drinking and taking up like a Cali sober lifestyle. And so once I think there's a place for folks like that to gather, we're going to see a lot more people leaving the bar and going to the consumption lounge.
For real. And you just got me thinking too, because, Florida is pretty much medical, but there's still a pretty big culture around consuming cannabis, anyways. And I think it might be a minute before we really get our own, but like I've always had experiences where we have kind of like speakeasies and stuff almost for cannabis in a way. Like it'll just be kind of like it'll be like smoke shops or different things like that that kind of like allow you to, I don't know, they just don't care as much here. But I definitely think like giving a space for it to be like, more in a legal sense so that they can't get in trouble or anything like that. Like it doesn't seem like that far off for someone to be able to like smoke a cigarette outside and someone to smoke a joint outside if they can do that at like some restaurant, because I'm pretty sure like restaurants still have like ashtrays outside in certain restaurants and stuff like that. Like how far off could we be from the restaurant industry completely transforming as well? It's crazy because as much as it seems like it's a new industry, it's really not, and it's had so many roots in time. But it is like so funny that we're still playing with these ideas that don't seem like that far off and like that crazy. It's just about like really waiting, the waiting game of all of this really taking place.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know like in Canada, when they legalized, I think the majority of provinces there were like, hey, treat it like cigarettes. Like wherever you can smoke a cigarette, you can smoke a joint. And I think that's how it should be. And I can't wait for that notion to get here to the States for sure.
Yeah, and when you like interact with a cannabis brand, like what makes you go wow? Like what are brands doing right now that you really like see?
I mean, they're definitely taking their branding to the next level, which is really cool, and taking the innovation to the next level. You know, we've come so far from just, gummies and brownies, and especially in the edible space, and the different cultivars of cannabis. People are really trying to lean into the fact that there are so many unique consumer demographics out there. Like nowadays, there's literally something for everyone. I love how the beverages space is coming up. There's so many great beverages on the market. Again, for the folks, especially who are Cali sober, I know that's like a huge thing. And the savory edibles too, like the shrimp chips from Potley are just like so interesting to me. There's just so many different choices. And I think right now we're really seeing brands pushing themselves to set themselves apart in that way, whether it's with their packaging, their product quality, their R&D, because there's no such thing really as brand loyalty right now, but there will be soon. And so I think people are trying to get in on the ground floor in order to gain that brand loyalty. And then, because the only place that we really see that right now is with Cookies, right? Like Cookies is arguably the most visible cannabis brand on the planet. Everybody knows what Cookies is. I see people wearing Cookies clothes all over the country. And when you have the power of something like that, Cookies is going to be a brand that will last. We'll be seeing
For sure.
Cookies for years to come, but there aren't really many other brands that can say that. And so I think they're pushing super duper hard to try to be like emulate that model and become a national player before there's even a national scene.
Yeah, and they've got things in internationally as well. I know that they're in Israel. They worked in deals over there, and then they've worked with deals. I think recently I just wrote about they just started working with a delivery service in California to be like delivering for them in certain locations, and they're going to be growing and growing and growing. I think Cookies has like such a potential to pop. I mean, they're already popping off. They already have people that are faking their brands. You know what I mean? It's like a Gucci of weed essentially, and we're just waiting for like the Louis Vuittons and the rest of them to pop up. What is there any upcoming brands that you can see coming in and being like in a Cookies spot?
I think Sherbinsky's is definitely one of them for sure. People seem to love Sherbinsky's. On the edible side, I think Wana Brands is really crushing it. They're everywhere, and they were recently acquired by Canopy Growth, so that's going to really take them to the next level. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who are really crushing it. I'm trying to think of who else. I mean, brands like Heavy Hitters for sure. I always try to think about ones that you see bootlegged. Like it's like to me that's when you really made it. like if
Yeah,
like I've seen bootleg, Sherbinsky's in like really random places in this country. It's like, oh, okay, like they're out here. I
yeah,
mean, they're not out here, but you know what I mean.
yeah. And so going back to psychedelics, like where do you see psychedelics like 5 years from now down the road?
I think we're going to see it in a clinical setting. I think we're going to see people going in to a facility, whether it's a therapist or another practitioner, having maybe short experience, but an experience nonetheless that can be really profound. But it's definitely going to be in a healthcare setting. So, do I imagine that could be decriminalization? I mean, I hope so, but I do feel like because they're going the medical route, that's just kind of how it's going to play out. Um, and I think it's a double-edged sword, right? Because while we do need to respect the fact that these are sacred compounds, we do need to remember that everybody deserves access. And so I was talking to Rick Doblin, the founder of the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and I was kind of bringing up this topic to him. And he was like, look, there's room for everything. There's room for a personal religious experience and there's room for a clinical experience. The difference is that the clinical experience could potentially be paid for by healthcare.
Right.
And they're not going to pay for you to do like to have a ceremony, with the shaman or at your friend's house or whatever it ends up being. So, and that kind of made me think because I do believe that everyone should have access to these compounds, and certainly not everyone can afford them. And so, if that's a way to get it to the people, so that they can have that experience, I'm for it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be amazing to see like some kind of hospital that would do like trip sitting basically to improve, people's moods in a sense, or like how they would ever go about, administering that, or, giving people maybe videos to do it at home. It would be an interesting thing to see like how they go about the process. But I have been seeing a lot more, just even things about edible mushrooms that have no psychedelics. There's just been like a whole mushroom culture in general, and like just this like love of mushrooms. Where do you think it all comes from?
That's a super good question. I guess like I think people are just more open and activated to the thought of plant medicine in general, first of all. So, they're like, okay, well, if cannabis can do this, what can that do? Right. It kind of opens those doors. But I also think that just in general, we're at a reckoning in our society with regards to mental health. Like we're in a literal crisis. And what we've been doing as a society isn't working. And so I think people are just looking for something different. And I think also just the powerful testimony that so many people give to this plant medicine really activates people. To my point earlier, I think that, if you have a positive experience with a mushroom, you're probably going to tell people about it, and then they might be curious too. I know a lot of people who are having insane success with microdosing right now. A lot of people are microdosing right now, and macrodosing for that matter.
Mhm.
And you really love to see it because it's bringing our society to a different wavelength that I didn't even know was possible. And while it's still a small segment of our society that's doing it, more people are just opening their hearts and minds to it, which is a really good sign.
Yeah, for real. Sorry, my PC's about to die. There's so many cords
Whoopsie.
on my setup that it's always the missing link for me. But we're
All
back
good.
and we're alive.
Hey.
Hey, hey there, hey. So, what made you like move to Minnesota?
Well, I was actually living in the Netherlands for a little while. I was an au pair, which is like a fancy word for a nanny, outside of Amsterdam. And I ended up leaving there, and I came here to go to school. Actually, I to finish my degree. I went to Hamlin University in St. Paul. Shout out Pipers, and ended up sticking around. And then as I started getting into the cannabis industry, then I started traveling more and branching out into different markets. And it was actually really cool because being based in the Midwest, you're kind of like right in the middle. So I could fly out to New York, I could fly down to Florida, I could fly out to Washington, California, all these places, and it never would take that long. There was never too much of an adjustment time zone wise. So it just kind of worked out. And people often ask me like, well, why did you stay? Like, why didn't you just move to Cali straight up, something like that, to a legal market? And the fact of the matter was that I was helping to look after my dad, because he was in such poor health for so long. And eventually, things started to fall on me. Like he was in assisted living, but he needed someone to advocate for him. So I was named his power of attorney. So it was really interesting because I would go out on the road for like a week or two, come back, look after him, do stuff for him, then go back on the road, come back. And after he passed away, I was tempted to leave, but I'm glad that I've stayed and been able to just go back and forth because I get the best of both worlds.
Facts. And I'm sorry for your loss with your dad again. What kept you going through like, going through your career path and taking care of your dad? Like what kept you just keep going forward?
That's also a really good question. It was difficult, because it's a really high stress situation and it's really sad, and it's hard to keep everything together. But just knowing that I was having an impact on people kept me going, and knowing that it made him proud, like I would send him postcards, I would show magazines that I was in, and he was stoked on it, like he thought it was really cool. And I would hear from people like, "Hey, I read your article. I Googled cannabis and autism. I found your work. My son has autism. My daughter has autism, or whatever it was." And so having those moments made it all worth it. And I definitely had to lean into my community as well. Like there were times when I couldn't be here and people stepped up. Like my friend John took my dad to the dentist one time, things like that. So having a community to really lean on in those times, because when you're taking care of someone like that, you really do feel alone so often. And it can be really challenging and really daunting. But just knowing that there were people out there who were being impacted by my work kept me going for sure.
That's amazing. And other than your dad, can you think of any other like people that have been your biggest supporters so far in your journey?
Yeah, there's a lot of folks. One person for sure is Drew Emmer over at Bovida. Shout out to Bovida. I don't know if you're familiar with Bovida. They make those awesome terpene shields that you put in with your flower. It keeps it fresh.
I
Um,
think I have seen that, yeah, at my
yeah, for sure.
dispo.
I usually have them like literally in my pocket, but I think they're all like behind me up in this shelf right now.
Being
Um,
used.
but but I actually met him in 2017 when I first started kind of getting on the national scene, and he reached his hand out to me immediately. He saw the potential in me, and he's never let me forget it. He's still continued to be. He's one of my biggest supporters for sure. Also, my friend Nikki Lawley, she's a patient, former nurse. I guess once a nurse, always a nurse. She likes to say. She actually had a traumatic brain injury while she was on the job, and medical cannabis saved her life.
Wow.
And I wasn't super new to the scene, but I met her, I want to say like 4 years ago, and she was really new trying to get into cannabis. And I've been able to follow her journey. She's followed mine. She's really been one of my biggest supporters. So I've had a lot of really great people. David Tran, actually, formerly of Dope Magazine and Fairchild Events. Like I've known him since the beginning of my journey, and I saw him at in Palm Springs recently, Hall of Flowers. He co-hosted an event after party, and he came up to me and he's like, I'm really proud of you. He's like, I've been watching you this whole time, and your journey is just awesome. And he's like, you're somebody. And I was like,
Aw.
whoa. I was like, David, you're somebody. Whoa, thanks.
I love that.
It was really cool.
Yeah, and you recently went to Cannadelic Miami. How was that?
It was awesome. Hybrid cannabis and psychedelics event. Really cool to see the Florida community come out and get to have conversations about plant medicine. There were two tracks. The cannabis track and the psychedelics track, but obviously a lot of synergy, a lot of overlap there. And it's really cool to see how many people are activated to the medicine. I was kind of worried that we would just see a lot of corporate folks, chads, whatever you want to call them, who are just trying to make a quick buck on psychedelics. And it was really cool to see how many people were actually like, no, like this medicine changed my life. This medicine changed, my family's life. I'm on a microdose right now, right? It was really cool to see. And a lot of really engaging conversations. A lot of cool folks came all the way down. A bunch of folks from California came out. Reggie from Oakland Hyphy was there. He kept it real. Got to hang out with the Beard Bros. That was really great. So yeah, it really brought a lot of really interesting voices together.
Man, I wish that there was more like of a Orlando scene. I feel like there needs to be some more things in the area because we have a lot of dispos and I know we have like a lot of just people involved in the cannabis, lifestyle. So I feel like there should definitely be more like movement over here. But do you have any more plans to come back to Florida or travel around in 2022?
Yeah, definitely. I know for Florida specifically, I'm thinking about going to the C Lab conference. It got pushed out, I think, to June. Cannabis Law, Accounting, and Business conference. Also, Microdose is going to have their second annual event. Not until November though. And so definitely we'll be hitting that one up. Their first event was incredible. Had a chance to go to that last year. And there's lots of other really fun events coming up in the near future. There's going to be another Hall of Flowers in Palm Springs in May, followed by the Green Street Festival, and the Emerald Cup Awards will be happening in conjunction with that in LA. That's going to be super exciting. I'm trying to think of what else. I think I'm going to try to get to Oklahoma City and some other like more emerging markets. I really want to try to focus on the emerging markets. I love spending time in the mature markets. because I have a lot of great friends there, and I love how things have come up. But I really do think that they have a need for voices in these emerging markets to make sure that they come up and do it the right way and kind of learn from the mistakes of the other markets.
Yeah. Do you see like a lot of women in the industry?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're out here, right? Like we're out here, but I think the problem is that there's a lack of representation for us like in the boardroom. You know what I mean? Like only 8% I think of C-suite is women in cannabis, which definitely sucks. But there's a lot of women in cannabis. It's not necessarily a male dominated industry. It's just like there's just a bit of a bro culture, and that's, something that is part of our society. But I do think there's a lot of like super badass ladies just killing it in cannabis. And fortunately, they're getting respect, which is awesome. Like, it's too bad that there is a little bit of a boys club mentality in a lot of guys out there who are elevating female voices and recognizing that there's badass chicks doing really cool stuff, whether it's on the grow side, the extraction side, the retail side, like we're out here.
Yeah, and I wanted to segue women in cannabis. How can you, or not women in cannabis? Sorry, the study of women in cannabis. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So the Women in Cannabis Study, it's a mixed methods research project. It was founded by Jennifer Wetzel of Lady Jane Branding. Super, super cool woman. She really wanted to understand more about the experiences of women in cannabis and share a living history as it happens. And so she initiated the study in 2019. They surveyed over 1,600 women from across the country who work in cannabis from all across the vertical, found some incredible stats. I mean, surveyed them about everything from their connection to the plant, their consumption methods, their barriers to success, their visions for success, their career paths, shame and stigma, challenges, wins, losses, all of the above. And it's all culminated in this incredible report that's going to be dropping really soon on March 3rd, actually. And it features some really dynamic voices from women across the industry and some really thought-provoking stats. And so I think it's going to be really interesting when it hits, because people are going to see that even though there's a lot of diversity and unique voices in this space, we have a shared experience as women in cannabis. And so hopefully it'll kind of shape the narrative and offer some ideas as to how we can improve and become an actually like equitable, inclusive industry as it happens. Because as I always say, we're writing the narrative as it happens. And so we have a chance to make this industry into something good, right? It doesn't have to be like all the other industries. And even though we're becoming like them because we're becoming more corporate and we're maturing, we can do it the right way. We do have the power to dictate how this thing plays out.
For sure, more power to women, more like voices for women. That's why this podcast like serves to just like keep getting the words out, because it is I learn truly every day, like when it comes to talking to women like you, just about how interesting and wonderful like the journey is. Because for me it starts 6 months ago, really taking it seriously. But for you, how long ago has like your cannabis journey really been?
I mean, I started consuming cannabis when I was like 15. And, I was involved in the legacy market, here in the Midwest. But I'd say that my journey in legal cannabis probably started in 2015. But I would say, for now, going on 20 years, I've been an active consumer and a proud consumer for sure. And really excited to activate other people to it as well. And I always say that, like, oh, sorry, my dog wants to join me. I'm just gonna go ahead and pick him up. This is Buddy.
Aw.
He wants to get on the show. Hey, bud.
Hey.
Um, and I hope though that people realize that even if they're curious about cannabis and their journey hasn't started yet, it's not too late. And that your journey can start at any moment, at any time, and that the journeys are ongoing. Like we don't know where they're going to end up, but it's super exciting to think about.
I think I remembered my point before I lost it again. No, where did it, like, it's literally like swimming. I literally see like the thought go by and I'm like, where'd it go? Um
Reel in the marlin. That's what my friend Mark Berkson always says when we're like high and we can't remember something. He's like, "Oh, just reel it in. It's right there. Pull it."
I know, it's on the tip of my tongue. But what has been like your experience, like, have you felt any kind of difference from being a woman, like, and speaking about cannabis? Like, when you walk in these rooms, do people automatically think that you have like such a long history in it, or?
No, actually, that's the thing is, people I think make a lot of assumptions when you're a woman in cannabis. It can be a lot harder to get that respect. Oh, sorry, all the dogs are barking. Guys, stop. Sorry. So,
You're good.
anyways, yeah, like it can be harder to get that respect, like people don't think that, you have any of that experience, but it's like, I've earned my stripes, and I think people need to realize that we need to be respected. And I think that's one of the main challenges and main barriers that we've seen in the report too, is that women just don't feel respected. And that's across a lot of industries though. It's not just cannabis, like we're just not taken seriously. And that's part of the problem. It's like, no, like we deserve to be here. We have experience, we have knowledge that's valuable.
For real. And like, I think it's so inspiring too, to be able to share your journey like online, and kind of destigmatize it as well, because it is brave, starting out, and like, especially when there's a time where people are just, giving you the side eye and really not understanding, and kind of giving you like an assumption on top of being a woman already about, what you're doing and how you're spending your time and what is professional and all that. So to add another layer to it is pretty hard, like, to go through. And I've wrestled with it myself, like smoking on my Instagram, or talking about it and stuff like that. It's like, conversation, like branding myself with it. So you're definitely right in the fact that, like, there is a stigma, but as long as we're talking about it and we're having conversations about it and we're normalizing it, I think that that's the most important thing we can do to really show people, like, hey, it can be beneficial, and there are like so many other ways to look at it than maybe how you've seen it in the news or experienced it like in your life too.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to keep talking about it. We need to put it out there. That's definitely part of it for sure. And you're right. Like it's still scary, especially living in a place, most of the time where cannabis is not legal. Like I definitely change up my content a lot when I'm in a legal state versus a not legal state. And while I was definitely anxious initially when I got into the industry, once I decided that I was all in, I was like, that's it. Like, I am all in and I'm living my truth. And if people have an issue with it, then that's on them.
Yeah,
But it's hard to make yourself vulnerable and put yourself out there like that. It can be scary, especially, when there have been consequences. And fortunately, stigmas are being reduced, but they still exist.
for sure. And it's so interesting too, because like there's so many dreams I want to have too, and for the idea that someone may judge me on what it is just kind of like, you're gonna encounter that no matter like what you go in life, from how you ordered a sandwich in front of someone to what you post on your Instagram. So I think, like, no matter what, we just gotta be who we are, and just kind of like live our, like you said, live your truth. Like, there's really nothing to look back on and be upset about if you're just like, yeah, this is all I am. These are the choices that I make, and you're just gonna have to live with it, and love me, either way.
Yeah, big facts for sure. And honestly, like the times when I have had great success in my life and in my career have been in the moments where I was 100% living my truth and feeling myself, and not questioning what I'm doing or who I am, And when I've found myself being free in those moments, all of a sudden, like something happens, like I get a new client or a different gig or I get invited to speak somewhere. It's like, so there really is something to be said about the power of believing in yourself. I know it sounds like kind of corny, but it's super true.
Yeah, I see it as manifestation. I always try to like manifest and like have the, what's it called, hmm self-fulfilling prophecy play out, right? Is just like, saying that you deserve it, and that that you can do it, and just keep working towards it, because as long as you cast down on yourself, it's just like a weight that is like unknown, just like anything, you don't really know until you try, and like, and that's just it, right? You don't know. But
Yeah, for sure.
so when it comes to like psychedelics, how did you get involved in that? Because I know that, like, there's, how did you hear about psychedelics, pretty much?
Well, on a personal level, I was first introduced to psychedelics when I was still pretty young. I, my friends, and I smoked cannabis a lot, and then they started, getting into mushrooms. And someone I worked with actually had some mushroom chocolates, and so that was the first time I tried them. She gave one to me at work, and then I ate one after work, and had a whole experience. But it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I kind of became more intentional about my consumption of psychedelics. When I think you're younger, you're just trying to kind of get your kicks and see what happens. But then as I got older, I realized it was more of an exercise in mindfulness. That's what I usually say. So I'm a lot more prepared. I don't just take psychedelics on a whim. Well, I guess that's not true. Maybe once in a while I will, but usually I try to like be more intentional. But as
Yeah.
far as how I got into it in the industry was I actually met Madison and Margolin, who is the co-founder of Double Blind magazine. And I actually met her in 2020 during the pandemic, and we kind of became fast friends. And she invited me to do a little bit of work for Double Blind for the website. And I was like, oh, wow. And then I kind of realized that the psychedelics thing was really starting to take off. And then I was invited to moderate a couple of panels at a psychedelic conference in Colorado. And things just kind of snowballed from there, much like they did with cannabis. And as we're seeing, the psychedelics space is really, really coming up quickly. And so we're going to see a lot more, I think, conferences, a lot more hybrid conferences for sure. Again, because of that overlap, people who are in cannabis are looking to psychedelics as the next wave.
Yeah. What do you see as the benefits of psychedelics to you?
Oh, so many. I mean, I think a lot of us can say that it really helps you to, first of all, like lose your ego, right? And just tap in and realize that there's something a lot bigger than us in this world. And also, it helps me to just, again, change my mind. When I'm having a psychedelic experience and something starts to feel uncomfortable, I'm able to pull myself out of it really quickly. And I try to go back to those moments in the quote unquote real world when I'm feeling anxious or depressed. It's like, hey, there are ways to get out of this, and there are ways to feel better. Change how you're thinking. Get out of it right now. And so that's been really profound for me. And also just recognizing that um, you know that psychedelics are a mirror, right? And they can help you face the truth, whether that's you want to hear it or not. And so it's really helped me to be more open with myself, more accepting of myself, and help me to live in the moment. And I practice Buddhism, so I kind of, they kind of go hand in hand, right? As far as the be here now mentality.
For sure. Yeah, I can definitely see them being something like medicinal and something people could take like at a microdose level. I've had friends like take it at a microdose level. Like, I've also dabbled in psychedelics as well. And I just know it to be such a beautiful experience to share with others, like, and I've had good and bad, moments with it, and that's, as important to include in the story of psychedelics as any, like both the good and the bad, just the idea that it can happen, because like I think the best way you can put yourself in the mindset of doing anything is just understanding that, like, even if it's a mindset, change, that you're still roped in reality, like you're still okay, and that you just like, you know what I mean? It's a temporary feeling. And I think that's like something calm about it too. Because if you can wrap your mind around, drinking, for a whole day, going out and getting day drunk, and then, going to Gasparilla or something like that, and then all, partying through the night. Okay, you can imagine partying for maybe like 8 hours. You know what I mean? So, for people, I think that think it's like such a scary experience, I think that they should, read up maybe on Reddit a little bit, or hear some stories from people in psychedelics, because I think it is definitely something that can change people's minds. I've seen people like get really empathetic after, taking psychedelics. It's really triggered, like, I my friends and I have dubbed it a zeros and ones mentality of just kind of knowing, like, we're all in this together, and like, things are gray, they're black and white, but like at the end of the day, like, this is our form, and we can just do what we will with like our bodies and our minds and our time, and just try to make the best of it and stuff. Yeah, I've always been someone that has seen it as like something very life changing, and something that definitely needs more people be behind and research, so people can do it safely, because it is hard for people to get the information. The internet is so broad, and so it's hard to root. You got to be really researching it, as you should with anything, right? researching and figuring out what something's going to do to you as food or everything. I think it's good too that the internet has really launched this kind of research mentality where it's like I can just look it up. Everything is so easy to do, so you might as well just take 2 seconds. Don't look at titles. Oh my gosh, like as writers we know about SEO, and like titles are not the whole thing. So don't go off the meta descriptions, don't go off the titles, go for the articles and the actual meat of it, because you can get yourself into conversations where you're arguing a side that you only read 2 sentences on and you didn't even see the research. So I totally believe in getting researched and all that, and it's really cool to see that you get to like write about it too. Because I also have friends that do it as well, but it's definitely not. There's definitely a stigma around it that I know and feel until today. I feel very like open that we can like talk about it too, which is cool. Because there's not many people I can talk about it with like outside of Florida, really. Even what I mean? Because
Yeah, we're definitely blessed to be in the positions that we are. I know that for sure. I mean, I get to live my truth. I get paid to write about cannabis and psychedelics. I get paid to try products. I get free product constantly. Like that's amazing. And it's funny to think that if I hadn't gotten busted, I might not be where I am today. And
yeah,
we have to really be grateful too for the fact that we're free right now, because there's a lot of people who are still in prison for cannabis. There are people who are still getting arrested all the time for cannabis who've had their lives damaged because of the criminalization of this plant. Like we're really lucky, we're out here living our truth. We're free. But there's a lot of people who aren't. And so I think we really have to remember that fact too, and make sure that
right.
there's a reckoning, so that we can have some restorative justice done in this country and, utilize our privilege to help others.
Yeah, and I've seen what cannabis, brands have been doing recently, like 40 tons, for instance. They have a whole social equity. They did an NFT, and they've been just doing stuff with their merch brand to try to raise awareness about, prisoners in for cannabis, and trying to raise money for them and give people that have been incarcerated opportunities to work for their company or companies that work with them. But I really do see like in cannabis that people really do care about these people behind bars, because like if people are profiting from the plant on the outside, then why aren't people still on the inside? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, facts. And they get forgotten, like people are like, "Oh yeah, like weed's legal, like this is so rad." But it's like, "Yo, there's still people in prison for this right now at this moment." And so I love that there are brands who are raising awareness like that. I actually just wrote a story about Farmer and the Felon, which is a Cannacraft brand in California, and they donate a portion of their proceeds to Last Prisoner Project, an organization that helps to free the remaining cannabis prisoners, helps them when they get on the outside, and to just raise awareness of the fact that this is still a thing. Because one of the co-founders, he actually, spent several years in prison for cannabis cultivation in the late '90s, early 2000s, and so he knows, like he's been there, and he
right.
never wants to forget that. Even though like we're relatively free now, it's like that wasn't always the case, and it's still not the case for so many people. And so it's really cool to see brands, using it as a platform to raise awareness.
How do you feel about like people being able to grow from home, like doing like growing their own cannabis from home? Because I feel like that should also be a part of like what we move forward to as well, because I've talked to a bunch of people in the cannabis space that also worry about safety and like uh in the supply chain, just like making sure that everything is as clean as possible. But I feel like there's going to be a lot of people that want to take their medicine into their own hands, as people have as farmers, or doing it illegally, or whatever, how they feel, right?
Yeah. No, I think people should definitely grow their own and be able to grow their own, and just have a connection with the plant, and be a part of it in this life cycle, because, this plant is such a receptive plant, like everything that we put into it, whether it's the water, the soil, the nutrients, the tender love and care, how you talk to it, like that all plays a fact in how the plant expresses. And to your point, we are seeing, in my opinion, a revolution in the supply chain. I was actually just talking to my boyfriend about it the other day. It's like we can't rely on the supply chain to give us what we need anymore. And I think it's only going to continue to be more difficult. And while I definitely believe that we need to support the legal market, buy cannabis, we vote with our dollar in this country, I do think more people need to grow their own and just have that experience with the plant. It doesn't mean you can't still go to the dispo now and again. There's plenty of products, but yeah, I definitely would love to see more homegrown. And I'm really sad that so many legislatures now are trying to ban home grow. And it
Right.
sounds, whether it's a conspiracy by the MSOs or like whatever it is, I think it's to the industry's detriment. Like, we should be free to grow it, how we want it. And to your point, take it into our own hands and on our terms.
Right, because like if people want to argue, oh, what about, the kids? The kids can get we have alcohol, in the cupboard. We have medication that we have to make sure, goes in the right place at the end of the day. Even cannabis, wrappers have, child safe or certain, what I mean, precautions in place for these things to happen. And if we could just talk about like it like seems preposterous to me for people to be like, no, you can't grow that unless it was something that if consumed by like an animal like by itself, was toxic and poisonous and would cause death. Like literally there are some flowers that you can buy from like a shop that could literally kill your cat if it eats it. Yet we can't grow our own cannabis at home. It's just like there's like so much hypocrisy, I feel like, in the legislature that's gone on, from years of stigmatization, and just misinformation about it. So it comes to a point where we just gotta like tell people, hey, wake up, let's like look back at these rules and be like, does this even make sense? Like there's, you know what I mean, there's all those like meme, laws that are still in place, like you can't wear like a pink shirt on Sunday or something, or like you can't eat ice cream like after 5 p.m., you know what I mean? Like it's getting into that range where it just seems kind of like, you know what I mean, why can't I, if I can grow sunflower, what's the difference, right?
Yeah, totally. And hopefully someday, we'll look back on all this and be like, damn, that was silly, And I
Right.
mean, and that's putting it lightly, because,
Yeah.
people have had their lives, ruined because of
Right.
criminalization. But like, it is going to end up, I think, being like that because people forget why this plant was criminalized to begin with. It all had to
Right.
do with just like, racist policy, racist attitudes, industrial attitudes, people wanting to keep the hemp plant down. And I think if people actually realize that, they'd be like, oh, damn, like, what have we been doing for the last 100 years? This is insane. But I think it's going to take, the world to kind of wake up to that before we're like, wow, like, that was really dumb that we did it like that.
Yeah. It's crazy though, because it does feel like, well, as we are every day, we're living through history, and this is something I always bring up a lot. But it's like crazy to really be a part of this history that is so long ago, and is here today, and like we've come so far, but yet it almost feels like we've come farther. You know what I mean? Like the culture obviously has brought it without the government, without the states. Before then, the culture has been established amongst the people. So it's really just about making everybody aware of like what we all care about these days. Because there's even there was like an increase in consumption because of the pandemic and everything like that too. And like it's truly like I really do not drink alcohol. Like I would much rather smoke. Like I don't even know what it is. It's just it's so much like feels so much worse for you, like going through, being drunk and then just the after effects and all that. And it's like smoking just is wonderful, I feel like.
Yeah, truly. It's just better for you, Alcohol is a poison, right? And like
Yeah.
cannabis, like we have an endocannabinoid system. Like we evolved, like we were born to accept these compounds into our body, We weren't born to accept alcohol into our bodies. So
Right.
like it makes perfect sense.
For real. What is your like favorite consumption method? Do you like flour, dabs? What's your forte?
I mean, I like to mix it up, honestly. Oh, sorry, the dogs are barking.
They
Oh,
wanted to answer too.
sorry. Sorry. I don't know. I like to mix it up. I like flour. I like dabbing. I guess I kind of mix it up in that way. I do edibles occasionally. I tend to get like a little more paranoid when I eat edibles just because the way they hit you is so different. But I still enjoy them from time to time. But yeah, I guess like a mix between flower and dabs. And as far as like what types of cannabis, I really like strains that are heavy in terpinolene. I really like a haze, like any kind of haze. I'm all about that. I've been into hazes since I was in the Netherlands, and I got to smoke super silver haze in Amsterdam. It was just so awesome. I also love like any sort of like diesel or gas. I'm always into that as well. So I like to mix it up. But I'm definitely more of like the uplifting, terp profile type person.
For sure. Would you ever, if you had the opportunity, would you ever get like a strain named after you, or like would you ever want to name a strain?
Whoa, yeah, definitely. That'd be like a super, super high honor. Again, no pun intended. But like, I guess I would have to like think of some really cute name, but it would probably be some kind of a haze cross, or like
Right.
maybe like a train wreck haze cross, or like a headband haze, like something in there because I love a headband, or like a tangy. I'm obsessed with tangy. So like maybe some sort of like tangy haze with a little bit of like chem in there somewhere. Like I think that'd be really cool. I'm not sure what I would call it yet. I'd probably come up with some sort of like alliteration. So like
Yeah,
some sort of like R word, or maybe I would make it like, even maybe I would name it in honor of my dad or something too.
that'd be
Like
cool.
Joe OG, something like that. Joe
Yeah.
Hayes. That's
Hell
my dad
yeah.
right there, by the way, in the corner.
I
Shout
love
out to
it.
my dad, Joe. Yeah, Joe Hayes.
Shout out.
Let's get that going.
Hell yeah. I just asked because me and my friend Hannah, she's the head editor of RMR. We were talking about it today, and I was like, that would be a dream. And we just started talking about it today, and we're like, that's definitely on the list. You know what I mean? That's a bucket list thing for me. Just as Amsterdam is also a bucket list thing for me. I definitely gotta head out there. Like I've done a little bit of international travel, but I've never done it like smoked weed out there. So I feel like that would be something crazy. That'd be cool.
You would love it, honestly. Like Amsterdam is just so sick. I have so many amazing memories of Amsterdam, just like chilling in the cafes, meeting people from all over the world, eating mushrooms and just like laughing, and the city's all lit up at night and you're just free, like you would really dig it. You got to get out there.
Yeah, for sure. I really do. It sounds like a wonderful time. There's so many like really cool places even in the states too that I got to visit. I just recently was in Colorado for the first time, and I love that I just like got to walk into a dispo and then, get whatever and walk out, and that was before I even had a medical card, so it was just like to me, you know, uh but I'm super excited for like the next gen of all of these like cannabis opportunities and industries coming out and just like blowing me away. And like I feel like I'm gonna go to Vegas and there's just gonna be all this stuff. I'm so excited. I never even knew about cannabis conventions until recently, like Hall of Flowers and what's the other one, MJ BizCon and things like that. I'm super excited. I really have to get out and like go there and talk to some people. Even just stand outside, I heard, is like something eye opening. So that's definitely gonna be on my radar. How do you find out like about cannabis events?
So, I mean, I follow just a bunch of different accounts and event production companies. And since I've been on the circuit now for so long, you just kind of pop on your radar. A lot of times people will be like, "Oh, are you going to this? Are you going to that?" "Oh no, I hadn't heard about it." But I usually try to stay on top of it. I also have a good relationship with a lot of PR people, and so if there's any sort of PR associated with it, I usually end up with an email. So that's always really exciting to me. And yeah, you definitely need to hit up some events. And the advice is totally correct. You don't necessarily have to go in, especially MJ BizCon. Like you could literally just stand outside in the sesh and run into everybody, or go to the after parties. A lot of people don't even go to the convention, but it's a trip for sure. I mean, you definitely see more suits than you would think, unless it's
Hmm.
like a really consumer heavy show. But most of the time, it's like people working, but then there's also folks outside, in the clouds, which is really sick. That's usually where I'm posted up.
Well, thanks. Thank you so much. It's been like wonderful having you and talking to you. Is there anything you want to shout out before we end for today?
Oh, I just want to say thank you so much for having me, and shout out to the whole Respect My Region team. I really love what you guys are doing, and keep up the good work. I encourage people to check out the Women in Cannabis Study when it drops March 3rd. You can go to womenincannabis.study. You can sign up for a free download when it comes out. Definitely scope that out. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn, Rachelle Gordon, or Instagram, StayGold612. I'm an open book. Happy to do what I can for sure.
Dope. Well, thank you so much. It's been really fun talking to you. That's the end of the stream, guys. I'm Maddie Forbes from Respect My Region, Higher Women. We are out.